Welcome back to another episode of the Fit Father Podcast, guys. I am your host, as always, Coach Spencer. Now, today we're going to take a deep dive into the Movember ALEC formula. Now, this is going to be how you can actually have a conversation with a guy in your life and how you can kind of help navigate those conversations to make it a little bit easier for both of you and come out on the other end feeling comfortable and confident that we're moving in the right direction. Now, that said, let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, before you actually get into anything tactical, is realistically pretty simple. And that is, you need to make sure that you are in a good place before you can actually help somebody else. Now, that should be self-explanatory, but let me help you out here. So I absolutely want you to have the confidence to check in with your bros, your guys in your life. But if you're not where you need to be at personally, you might only make things harder for both of you. So a couple of super simple tactical tips for you here is check in with yourself. Think of things like whether or not you're even in a good mental state yourself. Do you actually have the time to listen when you ask the questions and talk to them? And are you going to be okay if the other person that you are checking in with isn't ready to talk to you, or anybody for that matter? And then the last one is just to be yourself. Like, if you ask how somebody is and they say, man, I'm really not fucking doing good, are you prepared to respond to that? Are you going to be able to give advice and respond back to that? Now, I'm not saying, and I said this in the last episode, you don't need to be a counselor or a therapist. I'm fucking not. I sure as shit know that I'm not going to be able to come at it from that therapy or counseling perspective. No way in hell. And neither should you, unless that's actually like what you do and that's your job. Then ignore me, because I don't know why you're listening to me tell you about this. But just be yourself. Be able to be that ear for somebody, that unbiased opinion or input when they need it, and just let the guy talk more than anything. You really do need to just kind of listen. Now, the second thing here is to just make the time. Now, this doesn't have to be a weekly thing or a daily thing or a, hey, I'm going to check in with you at 12:22 on Sunday. Is that cool? But maybe it is, because that's what works for you. And that's just something that you need to figure out. But simply having a time to actually plan on catching up with your buddy is going to be a huge win, just to get you moving in the right direction to start having those conversations. Now, I personally would not recommend making that stopping at the bar, because that's not always the best place to have those conversations, and it could go bad really quickly and may not be somewhere where, you know, they're fully comfortable having a conversation, especially when it comes to their mental health. Adding in alcohol is not going to make the situation any better. Now, whether you check in on the phone, you text them, you could jump on a Zoom call, you could jump on FaceTime, find the time to be fully present and able to have the conversation that your buddy needs. This one is probably one of the biggest things that people forget or ignore, and they're just like, hey, yeah, I want to help, but, and then their buddy says like, yeah, dude, I'm not doing good. They're like, oh, okay, cool. And then they like ghost them. And if you're not able to like sit there and be present and actually have a conversation, if they want to have that conversation, it's not going to help anybody. So be fully present, be wholly there, and able to truly listen and actively listen in that conversation, should your buddy need that. Now to get into the actual tactical tips here, and this is the ALEC formula created by Movember. I'm just here to translate that into what I think is pretty basic terms, and using my own voice. So it all starts out very simply. A stands for ask. Just ask your buddy how they're feeling. Have you noticed anything different about them? You know, maybe they're spending more time at the bar. Maybe they're isolating themselves from group chats. Maybe they keep declining every time you're like, hey, man, do you want to go out and do this thing? Do you want to go play golf? Do you want to go bowling? Do you want to go whatever? Pick a thing. If they're all of a sudden now isolating themselves and not wanting to hang out, not really interacting in the group chats that they used to always be sending, you know, funny memes and shit in, maybe they're just going to the bar like every day of the week. That's not normal for them. Now, it doesn't really matter what the thing is, just that they're not being themselves. So the examples that I gave are, more practical examples that most people see, but it could be anything, anything that you've seen where your buddy's just not really feeling and acting how you've always seen them acting. This can be a very simple conversation. Hey man, haven't really been yourself lately. Is everything okay? And I can tell you from my own experience, the response is 99% of the time going to be like, yeah, bro, I'm good. Or, yeah, dude, thanks for asking. I'm fine. It's going to be something along those lines. It always is. And I know that because I used to give that answer. Now, don't be afraid to ask again, though. I've learned this over the last few years of coaching. That's not the right answer. And it's not the answer that they actually want to give, but they're hesitant to give it. So don't be afraid to ask again. It doesn't come across as being pushy, but that you genuinely do care about somebody, right? Now, it's, there are certainly ways that you can be like, yeah, okay, dude, fucking whatever. Like, seriously, what's going on? That's going to be a different conversation. But if you come at it and say something along the lines of like, yeah, man, I totally hear you. You've been spending a lot of time at the bar. It's just, it's not really like you. Just wanted to make sure that everything's cool. That comes from a place of, hey, going back to, haven't really been yourself lately. This is the thing that I've noticed that's been a little off. Are you sure that that's okay? Like, that's not who you normally are. It's not really like you to be that way. It's not like you to go sit at the bar by yourself, pounding beers and getting blackout drunk on a Tuesday. Maybe it is, but that's a different conversation for a different podcast. But that's really the simple piece, is just asking. Being able to ask your buddy, hey man, you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay? And not being afraid to ask again when they kind of brush you off and they're like, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I'm good. Worry about yourself. Like, no, man, what's going on? Now, the next step of the process, the L in ALEC, is to listen. This one should be pretty simple, but actually fucking listen. So many times it's easy to, ask the question and then be texting or be fucking Snapchatting or scrolling through Facebook and Instagram. Don't be half there. If you're going to have this conversation, don't be sitting on your phone. Actually be there. Actually listen to the conversation. Actively listen. I mean, shit, we were taught how to actively listen in probably middle school at this point in time. I don't even remember, but I know for a fact between middle school, high school, college, and now postgraduate for, a decade plus, active listening actually fucking matters. It's a real thing. Be present. Be listening. Be responding back to things that they're saying to you. Make it clear, though, that you're not judging them for anything. He may say some things that you're like, oh boy, but you can't come at it from the perspective of, oh boy. You got to look at it and say like, yeah, I get it. You're not trying to diagnose depression or anxiety or anything here. You're just trying to listen. Let your buddy talk because it's what he needs right now. Now, continue to ask open-ended questions. This is a great way to show that you're listening and you're caring, that active listening mentality of something along the lines like, yeah, man, that can't be freaking easy. Like, I'm sorry to hear that. Like, how long have you been feeling like this? That's a good way to continue a conversation because it's really easy for them to start to open up and then you just kind of brush them off and you're like, oh man, that sucks. Yeah, that's sorry to hear that, dude. But asking questions, like kind of peel back the layers of the onion, if you will. Keep asking those questions. Oh, how long have you been feeling that way? Like, man, is there anything that like I can do to help you out? Like, can we, do you need me to help have a conversation with anybody? Do you need whatever? Like, what do you need from me? And just kind of keep asking those questions depending on where the conversation goes. Respond back to what they're saying to you and ask questions to let them keep opening up because they might stop talking, but you know that there's something there. Keep digging a little bit deeper. Eventually you'll kind of unearth what's actually going on and be able to give a little bit more guidance, which leads us to the next step, the E in the formula, which is now that you've had that conversation, you want to encourage action. Now, again, encourage action. You are not a therapist. You are not a counselor, and that's okay. But maybe it's something as simple as, man, you've only been sleeping 4 hours a night. Like, is there anything you can do to like try and sleep for 6 or 7 or 8? Can you get a better night's sleep? Can you get more sleep? Like, will that help? Is that something that you can try and do? Maybe Maybe it's fitness. Maybe offering your buddy, if you're listening to this podcast, hopefully you already are in fitness. If not, highly encourage it. But offer to take your buddy to go to the gym. Hey man, fitness saved my life. Fitness has been huge for me. I love using it as a de-stressor. Oh, it's great to decompress. I know it's not really your thing, but I got a guest pass my gym. Would love to take you with me. We can go through a workout together and just hang out, go through a workout, get back into that fitness routine that you maybe fell off on. It can pretty much be anything in this situation, as long as it's an action towards something that's going to help them feel more like themselves and is good for their mental health. Don't say, oh man, that sucks. Maybe you only go to the bar Thursdays and Saturdays and black out. That's not going to be helpful. Think of things that are actually going to be helpful. More sleep, better fitness, talking to other people. This isn't, again, suggesting, hey man, just cut it down to like 1 case of beer a week. Talking to other people is going to be huge. Obviously, you've opened the door now to having the conversation, but we all have our circles. We all have our communities. Like, that's who we are. I think I talked about it a little bit in the last episode. Like, we're not individual people. We thrive in communities. We thrive on relationships. Encourage them to talk to other people in their circles, in their communities. I'm sure that there are other people that would love to have those conversations. I am one of those people. If you're in my circle and somebody else in our circle or community is struggling, 1,000% send them to me, because I will have that conversation. And I love having those conversations because I care about helping people. Like, that's why we have this podcast. That's why I've been doing these episodes, is to help. That's why I'm a fitness coach, is to help people change their lives and become the best versions of themselves. This is a great place where, if it comes down to it though, you can suggest, hey man, maybe, have you ever thought about going to therapy? Have you ever talked to somebody professionally about this? If this has been going on for a couple of weeks in their head, this is really the way that you want to go. Is don't say, hey man, maybe get some more sleep. It would strongly be something where I would say, hey man, I would probably consider talking to somebody professionally. There's a lot of opportunities out there. Apps like BetterHelp came out right before the pandemic, I think. Paid therapists. They're online. This is not sponsored. I am not sponsored. I am not promoting this. However, BetterHelp is an option. It's 100% online. You can do Zoom calls with a therapist. Something like that's simple. If you don't want to be the guy that goes and lays down on a couch and has this philosophical conversation with somebody, that's a good opportunity. And they're trained psychologists and therapists and whatever, and counselors. And it's not totally expensive. That's a good opportunity if that's the right answer. And then the last piece here, fam, as we start to wrap up, is check back in. The C in ALEC is check in. This is super easy. Say you're going to catch up soon. Ideally, try and catch up in person. Hey man, Birds are going to be on Sunday Night Football. You want to come over to my house, or I'm going to come over to your house? Is that cool? We can hang out and watch the game together? Hell yeah. Something like that. Just a time for you to sit down and catch up. Maybe it's during the week and you're not Eagles fans. I don't know why, but maybe you're not Eagles fans. And you say, hey man, why don't we grab coffee on Wednesday? Before we head into work, we can just grab a quick cup of coffee and meet you at Starbucks, 7 o'clock. Sound good? Now, if you can't meet up because, they live across the country or they live in a different state or whatever, suggest another time. Just jump on a phone call, jump on Zoom, FaceTime, whatever it is. The pandemic allowed us that flexibility a lot to be able to say, hey man, let's just FaceTime. Let me call you. I'll call you on FaceTime and chat for a little bit, just see how things are going. Even if it's something that only you put into your calendar, just so that to reach out and check back in with your buddy after a few days or weeks or every few weeks, whatever that is. It's just that one last little piece to show that you do genuinely care about your buddy and that you're there for them when they need it, because they might have this conversation with you and then you don't check in and they're like, yeah, okay, cool. Spence checked in with me and that was awesome. I appreciated it, but I might, they may not feel comfortable reaching back out to spark that conversation back up. So checking back into them gives them the opportunity to be like, oh man, we had this really great conversation. I really want to talk to him again, but I don't want to burden him, which we talked about in the last episode. I don't want to be a burden. But if I reach out, say, hey man, how you been? It's been a couple weeks. How you feeling? That might open up, the friggin' dam and all the water is going to come rushing back out again, and we'll get the whole story and more of it and everything like that, because now they've been comfortable and they feel comfortable and confident enough to have those conversations. And ideally, when you check in, you'll get that gauge. How have they been feeling since you last spoke? The best case scenario is better. Worst case scenario, worse. Definitely recommend, hey man, really should probably talk to somebody about that professionally, not just the guys. Don't talk to the boys about it. Go talk to, a therapist or a physician or whomever about that. Something along those lines. Now, with all that said, that's the entire ALEC formula. So that's all I got for you today, fam. This is a huge and fantastic resource that Movember has put together. They put it together right at the beginning of the pandemic, and it has been massive, 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 massive. So if you're not sure what to do, I will throw in the show notes a link to Movember Conversations. And this is literally as close as you can get to like a chatbot of what to do in certain situations. And you can literally walk through kind of how to have these conversations within semi-realistic situations of how people are going to respond, what you think you should respond with, and it'll help kind of guide you through those conversations if you're really not sure what to do. Now, I'm going to leave you the same way I did last episode. I am not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to force you into my coaching program, but I can and I will always be here if you need somebody to talk to or to listen to you. My DMs are always open. If you ever need anything from myself or somebody else, please don't suffer in silence and hesitate to ask. I hope this episode has been helpful for you. I hope that you'll come back next week and continue listening as we break down more of these Movember Mindset Mondays and grow together. I will continue to leave links in the show notes to additional resources from Movember should you or anybody you know need them. Do not, please, ever suffer in silence. With that, hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. If you found this episode informative or helpful, I would love it if you would share it with some people. Until next time, I'm Coach Spencer. Peace, love, and protein.